This is the first event that we've had since. I'm Carla Bartholomew and I'm Regional Chair for the CIBSE South West Committee. I'd first like to kind of briefly touch on our activities and how CIBSE South West Committee have thought it best to support our members during COVID-19, being aware that there are quite a lot of industry events and activities already being made available online. So for the immediate future, we've the CIBSE South West have made the decision to kind of not saturate the market or our members with too much online content, and so we're kind of instead sharing the relevant events of our collaborators in the built environment. So hopefully, for those of you that follow us on LinkedIn, our LinkedIn group will have seen today's post, which links to some informative events, which are hopefully of interest to you and relevant to the built environment from our collaborators. So today we're excited to focus on a topic that we haven't really touched on in a while, which is STEM and our outreach to young people, particularly in showcasing how STEM subjects can lead to an amazing career in our industry. Our speaker this evening is Alex Freeman, who I'm delighted has recently been elected as Vice Chair of the South West Committee. And Alex is by day a project lead at Edwards Vacuum, whose technology reduces global greenhouse gas emissions by 330 million metric tons annually, which is amazing. Alex has applied his deep enthusiasm and passion for engineering through his work as a STEM ambassador for the past 6 years. And he studied and observed many STEM thought leaders in this space to further his aim of inspiring increased participation in STEM subjects among the next generation of bright UK minds. On that note, I'll shortly ask Alex to take over the stage and begin his presentation. But in the meantime, as a bit of a housekeeping, can I ask that everyone please keep their microphones on mute and your cameras off to maintain the quality of the presentation? We'll also be having a Q&A after, so please could you just post any comments that you have in the comments box to the side, and then I will pick them out and pose them to Alex for you. Alex, do you want to start your presentation?
Thank you very much, Carla. Yes, I'll be delighted. So, as I'm sure you're all aware, my presentation this evening is going to be on STEM, and specifically how you can increase the effectiveness of your outreach. So this is the topics I'm going to be covering this evening. I'm going to have a brief introduction, a history of STEM and why I think we can do better, why STEM and women in engineering really matters in this context. And I'm also going to give some practical examples of how you can implement my my methodology. And I'm more than happy to have a good old debate with anyone at the end if you've got any comments or feedback or disagreements with my thesis. So let's get to it. Just a quick disclaimer. The information and opinions that I'm going to express this evening are mine and mine only. I work for Edwards Vacuum, and as Carla pointed out, I'm very grateful to recently been elected CIBSE Vice Chair. However, these are my opinions only. I very much hope you enjoy the presentation, and like I said, if you've got any questions, I'd be more than happy to take them at the end. Please leave them in the notes section, as Carla said. So, my name is Alex Freeman. I studied at the University of Bath, where I achieved a mechanical engineering degree, a master's degree, in 2014. I've since gone on to work for Renishaw, where I completed a grad scheme, and I went into metal additive manufacturing, or 3D printing as some people call it, in the research and development department. My specialization was in surface modification, which sounds incredibly boring, but when you consider that the parts of 3D printed geometries can have internal geometries, polishing an internal geometry where you can't actually see that surface is a very complex and difficult challenge, and that was the remit of my research then. I've the last 18 months been working at Edwards Vacuum as a project leader, Edwards Vacuum supplies equipment and infrastructure to semiconductor manufacturing industry. Like Carla said, the CO2 emissions from the semiconductor manufacturing industry are unbelievably bad. Before our technology was introduced, the semiconductor manufacturing industry had 10% of worldwide greenhouse gas emissions, and we've reduced that dramatically since the technology's come along. And of course, the most important thing is I am a STEM ambassador. I have been since I've left university. Very passionate about this, as I believe the future prosperity of engineering in the UK depends on the next generation of engineers coming along and adding those innovations of the future and also replacing the retiring engineers too. So it's incredibly important, I feel. So a brief introduction. I'm sure many people in the webinar are more than familiar with STEM. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here if you didn't care about it. But STEM Learning, the organization, they say that they are the largest provider of education and career support in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. They work in schools and colleges and others working with young people across the UK. Now, I want to preface the beginning of this discussion because I'm going to be critiquing a lot of the aspects of STEM as we go along. But of course, my objective is to improve upon this. So I see the STEM organization has a noble mission. And like I said, it's essential to the future prosperity of the UK STEM sectors. And in my opinion, the integrity and efforts of STEM ambassadors is absolutely beyond reproach. Unfortunately, I think the statistics show that STEM is underperforming. And I'll get into some of those statistics in a minute. But I think with a few small tweaks to how STEM ambassadors are conducting their outreach, I think we can dramatically improve upon these numbers. And I'll get into that in a minute. So a little bit of historical context. So in 2002, the government issued a report identifying a huge gulf between the uptake of STEM subjects and the demand from industry at the time. Uptake of engineering subjects and STEM subjects in general have been on the decline through the 90s, and this is a worrying trend that needed to be reversed if we wanted to have a strong manufacturing industry in the future. So in 2006, the government backed a STEM program, and the aim was increasing the uptake of these subjects at higher education. So it's really important that that is the objective of STEM. That is what all of this is about, despite the fact that you really struggle to find this on the STEM website, which I find interesting, that the aim of STEM is to increase uptake of subjects at higher education. That is the agenda. I know it may seem obvious to us as ambassadors, but I find it quite remarkable that you will struggle to find this aim on the STEM website. There's a lot of, we aim to show children about STEM and inspiring children and getting children excited about STEM. Those are all great things, but the aim is to increase uptake at higher education. So there's no doubt that STEM subjects contribute a huge amount to the economy. And I've just got a few statistics on the right here that almost 6 million people working in the UK are involved in the STEM sector. This is almost £400 billion of gross value added from the engineering sectors. Like I said, there is a big shortfall in graduating engineers. The government estimates this to be about 30,000 in engineering and technology alone. And it's clear that billions have been spent by industry and government on STEM programs. I haven't been able to find an exact number, but the government's regularly throwing 200 million here, 200 million there at STEM over the years. So it's at least in the single digit billions that have been thrown at STEM over the last nearly 15 years. So I talked about some of the statistics, and I'm going to start off on a bit of a positive note, actually, because it appears that this is obviously a very relevant subject for what's going on in the world at the moment, but BAME population in higher education has been increasing, and increasing by 1.6% compared to the BAME UK population. So this is quite a positive trend since 2005. So BAME people are actually overrepresented by comparison to the population of these people in the UK. So I've not seen any STEM objectives of increasing BAME, but if that's a byproduct of diversity increasing, then we can only see this as a positive thing, I suppose. The next thing I would like to talk about, which is certainly going to contribute a lot towards my thesis on how we can improve, and that is the gender diversity in engineering. Of course, everyone's well aware there is a big disparity between male and female engineers and technologists. Please note, by the way, that these graphs are all about engineering and technology only. The mathematics and the sciences are separate, and I've been able to find very good statistics for engineering and technology only. But given that all the people on the call are likely engineers or technologists, I felt that it was relevant to the audience. So that's just one caveat. Interestingly, there has been no change in the uptake of female engineers and technologists taking undergraduate degrees. I consider 0.1% no change. Hopefully you all agree with me as well. Interestingly, on average, almost 60% of students as a whole are female, but only 16% of students in engineering and technology degrees are female. So clearly there's a huge disparity there. I also found it interesting that in Latvia, Sweden and Italy, there are 30%, 26% and 20% of the engineering and technology workforce are actually female. So clearly it is possible to double the amount of females that we have in engineering roles if it's possible in Latvia. And in other parts of the world, I think the numbers are even higher, particularly in Muslim countries. Apparently there is a significantly higher number. I haven't been able to find any good, reliable statistics on that though. So we can end on a positive though. But overall, STEM, or the number of students taking STEM subjects at university, or engineering and technology degrees specifically, has increased by 32% in the last 15 years. So I'm positive that STEM is making a difference, certainly. But if you see the disparity, the purple line at the top is the government target for how many engineers they believe we need to meet the industry demand. And if you can see the blue line is the actual total number that are graduating today. So we need approximately double of the number of engineers and technologists to graduate per year to meet the future demand. Of course, you could say the government number may be debatable, it may be highly ambitious or completely unrealistic, but the government has come to this conclusion from several different reports. There is a huge number of retiring engineers, so I don't think it's unrealistic that we would need to replace some of those engineers, especially if you consider that 6 million people in the UK are working in some form of STEM sector. 30,000 engineers per year graduating does seem like a drop in the ocean by comparison to that workforce. So it seems like we have a long way to go before we are reaching the end game of having the supply of engineers versus the demand for engineers equally matched. And this is where my thesis comes into play. I believe that if we could dramatically increase the participation from females and capture a certain amount of males that are also on the fence about a career in engineering, then we could dramatically increase this. So you can see the, I'm going to call it a turquoise kind of color line, is the number of engineers that will be graduating if the same number of females would take up engineering and technology as did males. So you can see we're a lot closer to that line if that were the case. I would like to end on a positive note that I said at the beginning. The efforts of STEM ambassadors are incredibly noble, and we should all be congratulating ourselves for such a good job to date, that we are trying our best to make a difference. And I think it goes without saying that the situation would be a darn sight worse had there been no STEM at all. So, my thesis. This may be a little bit dumbed down and it may be a bit of a simplification, but I'm hoping that it's going to give a little bit of an insight into what I think is the right course of action for STEM going forward. So this, what you see on the screen here is my very poorly drawn representation of generic engineer with spanner giving a presentation to a class of 30 children. Okay. Now I've divvied these children up into 3 groups, and again, this is a complete oversimplification of what is an incredibly complex problem. But I'm hoping that you'll get my gist of my argument, because we could be on this call for much longer than an hour if we're going to get into gender politics and societal politics as well, and interests between sexes and groups among children. It's very complex, a complex field which goes far above my head. But the statistics do support what I'm saying. There are many more female nurses than male. There are many more male engineers and technologists than there are female. So you can debate all day long why that is, whether it's socialization, whether it's to do with nature. So is it a nature or a nurture thing? Of course, I'm not going to get into why that is. I'm just going to give you a methodology to apply based on the state of affairs as they are today. Okay. So we have generic engineer with spanner. The first group, I'm calling them the done deals. So you're presenting to a group of children. There's a chunk of children in that class. They love engineering. They think tech is super awesome. They're a complete done deal. Whether you're stood in front of them telling engineering is cool or you're not, they're going to think engineering is cool. Now, you might be reminding them that it's cool, or you might be enforcing their ideas that this is a great idea. But I'm not so sure spending a lot of time with the done deals is a very useful way to spend our time, because just your presence there alone, you could say anything about engineering, they're going to be really interested because they likely have a strong interest in this already. The next group, I think, are a little bit more interesting, and I've called them the in-betweens. Now, this group of people, they may be excellent engineers, but they may not realize that they may be excellent engineers. They may have mixed interests. You know, the done deals, they're great at maths and physics, and they love things, they love technology. You know, they think bridges and trains and robots are awesome. The in-betweens, they might think that they're okay, but they might have very broad interests like arts and humanities, and they might have high aptitude. They might be high achievers because they might be very good at lots of different things. They might also have fantastic social skills, which some engineers are lacking. So I think that the in-betweens are an interesting group that perhaps we should be paying a little bit more attention to. And then, this may sound a little harsh, but there are the no chances. No matter how much outreach we give to this group of people, they are just simply not going to be interested. They may not have the aptitude. They may have already made their mind up that they want to do something completely different. They may have zero interest in maths and physics and logic and things. And no matter what you do, no matter what you say, it would make no difference. They might not even be interested in school, like I was when I was 16 years old. So really, the thing is, we subconsciously project our own experiences and views about engineering because, you know, as STEM ambassadors, none of us have really had rigorous training in this. We've just been told to go out, tell our story, try our best, try to be inspiring, and all those things are great. However, if we're just talking about our own experiences and views, we're just telling a bunch of prospective engineers, i.e. the done deals, what they want to hear. We're just telling people what they already know. And like-minded children will identify strongly with the STEM ambassador. The done deals are already similarly minded children to the engineer adult giving the presentation. They can see that person in themselves already. And many children would make fantastic engineers, but they don't know it yet. And that's the key. We need to get the population of the children that may not even realize that they would make fantastic engineers, and we need to get them on board. They need to believe that they could be fantastic engineers. And that's why I'm going to give you a methodology to apply here that will hopefully get some of the in-betweens on board. So a quick summary of what I mean here by done deals and no chances and in-betweens. And so the done deals, they love things. Machines, tech, structures, they're sold. They know it's cool. They love it. It's their dream to become an engineer or a scientist or whatever. But they're sold. It's done. Typically, us engineers, us technologists, we're less interested in humans and more interested in things. By its very nature, we make things, you know. So we would have a strong interest in engineering regardless of the outreach that the STEM ambassador gave. Granted, we will be reinforcing their interest, which is of course a positive thing, but I don't think we should be investing all of our efforts into the done deals because they're done deals. We want to be spreading our net a bit broader and trying to capture some of the other people, the in-betweeners. So the no chances, again, it's a harsh term, but I couldn't think of anything better to use. But they're just not interested in engineering. It makes no difference. They don't care about maths. They don't care about logical things. They don't care about mathematics. Or they may just have a completely different idea for their career. They might want to go and be a plumber. They might have zero interest in school. You know, they may have already made up their mind completely about this. So no matter how hard we try, it's not going to make a difference. That's not mean to say we're not interesting children in enriching their education experience. That's a positive thing to do. But our objective here is to make sure that the future of our industry is secured and prosperous. That is our aim here. So investing too much time in the no chances and the done deals, I think, is not going to further our aims. And of course, that brings me on to the in-betweens. I think we as ambassadors need to be focusing most of our outreach on the in-betweens. Like I said, they may have broad interests, logical, scientific, mathematical aptitude. They may be really good at lots of things. You know, they might have all the options when it comes to choosing their A levels. They might have done great in their GCSEs and they can choose whatever they like. We need to get them to choose maths and physics. They may be completely uncertain in their future career because they have broad interests. Smart people are like that. The group likely contains more females than males. Now, this is just true because in our first group, the done deals, contains mostly males. So it follows on that if 50-50 of the population are male-female, the group likely contains more females than males if we're talking about in-betweens. Now, again, I said this is broad generalizations here, but you know, when we're looking at statistics and numbers, we have to be pretty general in what we're talking about here. So females do generally care less about things and care more about humans. Now, like I said before, the example I used, if you look at nurses, much more nurses are female than males. And when you go the other end of the spectrum, physics, I think it's less than 5% are taking are females taking that as a degree course. We could talk about it all day long for why that is, whether it's nature or nurture. I think that for the purposes of what we're trying to achieve, it's irrelevant. All we need to do is understand that if we're targeting our outreach and we want to get some more of those in-betweens, we need to be focusing our outreach on things that would appeal to in-betweens. And in-betweens are going to be more female than male. So without further ado, this is basically how I think we can go about doing this. We must pitch to the in-betweens. We must always relate our outreach back to a human or ethical impact that we had in our work. We need to go out and show people, the in-betweens, that we are virtuous, ethical people that are changing the world for the better. That is the message that we need to send out there. You know, looking at the youth of today, what are they interested in? You know, we need to talk about those things when we go out into school, not just talk about the stuff that we think is interesting or is very specific to our job. We need to try and bring it back, even if it seems a bit tenuous. Try and bring back some of the stuff that you do in your job. Try and bring it back to stuff that is interesting to children. Buzz topics for in-between kids today: the environment, technology, diversity, saving lives, improving health, reducing poverty. And of course, you could say, well, of course, all humans care about those things, right? I mean, you'd have to be pretty awful if you didn't care about a lot of those things. But, you know, the youth of today, they seem to really, really care about this sort of stuff. So the subliminal messages we need to get, you know, when we're reading between the lines here, is you can make a difference to the things you care about if you become an engineer, okay? And that's the key point here. We're not just going to hit them over the head and demand that they become engineers and give them some instructions. We need to show by example that, look, you know, I'm making a difference with the career that I've chosen. I'm helping the planet, I'm helping humans, and it's as a direct consequence of the work that I do. And this is the message that we need to send out to kids, especially if we want to target the in-betweens. So you may be asking, well, how do I do that? So I've put together a couple of examples I've used in my outreach in the past. Example number one. Like I said before, I used to work at Renishaw. And again, this is not the opinions of Renishaw, this is my opinion. So if I was to say, using my methodology of how to pitch to in-betweens, this is how I wouldn't do it. I'd say, I helped develop and test a neurosurgery robot that my company sells. This is used globally to perform various brain surgeries. It has a repeatability of 100 microns. That's the same as the width of a human hair. That might be interesting, and especially to the done deals, they're going to think, well, that's cool, right? That's really awesome. However, I think if we're going to be pitching to in-betweens, you could phrase it like this. You say, I helped develop and test the neurosurgery robot my company sells. Same opening line. Last year, this robot performed hundreds of life-saving and life-changing surgeries worldwide for illnesses such as Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. Without it, a surgeon requires decades of experience to perform these surgeries, meaning that 10 times more people can receive these surgeries at hospitals with our technology. So what we're doing is we're relating what is a piece of technology, an innate thing, and we're relating it back to a huge human impact, life-changing surgery. 10 times more people can receive the surgery, Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. This is the sort of stuff that very virtuous, caring people, that's the sort of stuff that's going to really engage them. Say you're a 16-year-old girl, you're super smart, you could pick any subject you want, and you're thinking, well, maybe I'll do biology because I want to be a doctor, because I want to help people. I would always go out into schools and I would say, well, look, if you want to be a doctor, if you want to save lives, you need to be an engineer. Because if you develop a piece of technology like this, how many surgeries can a surgeon do a day? And do like one, maybe two. How many surgeries can this robot perform worldwide that you help build? Thousands. I mean, it's hundreds of thousands if you had enough robots out there in the field. So who's having the bigger impact on humanity? The engineer that builds a robot or the surgeon that uses the robot? to me, the answer is quite clear. And there's one more example. I'm sorry for the resolution of the image. I can't find a better one. But I'm going to use an example that I've used recently in a presentation that I've given to a school in Clevedon. It's semiconductor manufacturing. It's my current role. We sell a technology that is bespoke to the semiconductor industry. So here's my example of how I wouldn't do it if I'm targeting in-betweeners. I work in new product introduction, specializing in fine powder management. My company produces products for the semiconductor manufacturing industry. Our product converts hazardous gases through combustion into less harmful gases to meet regional regulations. It's completely factually correct. It is completely true. It's not bad. Perhaps if you're a done deal, you would be interested. You would say, well, that's quite interesting. There's a complicated machine there. I mean, combustion sounds cool, right? However, I think if we're pitching to in-betweeners, we need to bring it back to that virtuous, ethical objective of what we're trying to achieve. So if I'm going to pitch to the in-betweeners, I'm going to say, I work for a company which produces products for the semiconductor manufacturing industry. Microchips are semiconductors which are in almost every electronic device. Without our technology, the semiconductor industry will contribute 10% of all greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. My personal contribution to lowering CO2 globally would fill Wembley Stadium with coal every year. Of course, the environment's an incredibly hot topic right now, particularly to the next generation who are probably thinking, my parents and grandparents have really shafted me on this one. They've left me a terrible planet and things are going to get worse. And I wish I could be Greta Thunberg and making a really big difference. Well, I would make the pitch. Well, if you really do want to make a big difference, you need to be an engineer so that you can develop technology like this, which has a real impact on global CO2 emissions. And it's achievable. What I do is I'm not special. I'm not an outlier of an engineer. I'm an average engineer working for a company that does something ethical. And you can choose that career too. So this is what we really need to be working towards if we want to capture those in-betweeners. We need to always relate things back to an ethical cause. The done dealers think things are cool, regardless of what the things do. They are just interested anyway. The in-betweeners, they may not be so hard on that end of the spectrum, and they need to be shown, if you really want to make a fantastic difference to the world, then you must become an engineer. And that is my thesis. I'll just close on this, that you may be thinking, well, this sounds a bit nonsensical, or there's gaps in what I've said, and there could well be. And this, like I said, this is a simplification of what is a complex problem. But and I have robbed this hypothesis from someone else, and I've been digging and digging and digging. I can't find the original article where it came from, but I read a really interesting article by a female engineer who was the head of a national engineering organization. And she had written a paper about this exact topic, how if we want to bridge the gap, we need to pitch our STEM outreach to things that females care about. Females generally care about a human or an ethical impact more than they care about things. And that article really grabbed my attention. So this is not my thesis. I am just applying it to day-to-day STEM activities. But I'll close on this one piece of information. Is every time I have applied this method and I've been speaking to a multi-sex year group, I have always got feedback from females, always positive. Straight after giving the presentation on the slide that you can see right now, I actually had 2 young girls call up the office and say they wanted work placements with the company. It was after I'd given that presentation. no boys, interestingly enough. Whereas the year before, that school had given us 4 15-year-old boys. And the year that I gave this presentation, the only people interested were girls. Of course, this could just be coincidental, but I think that it is. I've seen the impact of this with my own eyes, and I would love the people on this call to try out this methodology for themselves, improve it, hone it, and see if it works for you. It's certainly been working fantastically well for me, and I'm certainly going to continue to be doing this because I believe very strongly that the future of STEM means that we must be encouraging more females into the sector. Thank you very much for listening. I've really enjoyed giving the presentation, and I hope you have too.
Thank you very much for that, Alex. That was excellent. Yeah, it was really interesting to see the fact that, you know, countries like Latvia, Sweden, Italy have such significantly higher amounts of females in their engineering degrees. And quite worrying, you know, those graphs that you've shown to say, you know, the differences between our incoming supply of engineers who are graduating and those potentially leaving the industry. We've got quite a gap there. And yeah, that totally makes sense in terms of kind of, I like the philosophy of the kind of in-betweeners, and it does make sense that they're more you know, they're bound to be kind of more female, and I suppose appealing to the female psyche, you know, the human and, you know, the mother nature and the nurture side of things makes a lot of sense. I know it's a bit, you know, a bit cliche, but it's definitely true that females obviously kind of do focus on looking at the kind of human and ethical impacts of things. So I'm definitely going to try that and take that forward when I'm doing my my STEM presentations, and see how I can focus it more on looking at kind of the health and improvements of health and well-being that my job role entails. I think particularly, I know my company are looking at really focusing on the UN Sustainable Development Goals within our day-to-day engineering activities, and I think that just linking in with those and tying them into what we do, and showcasing what the positive impact that we have on kind of you know, lots of sectors in society and third world countries and all sorts would be really helpful. So thank you very much for that. We are recording this, aren't we? So obviously, if anyone wanted to come back and you know, use some of the statistics in their own presentations, and then we'll be posting up a copy of this recording for you. I just wondered, we haven't got any questions yet, so oh, we've just had one question. I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. It's Priyanka. So is asking, how do you convince parents that careers in STEM are secure and well paid compared to traditionally well paid industries like law and medicine, for example?
That's a fantastic question, actually, because this is something I covered in a recent presentation I gave at schools. Because I feel, aside from just this, you know, this is one factor of STEM outreach that I think is an issue, is the misconception about what we do. I think I saw some research going back a few years that they asked most of the you know, the population. They sent out a questionnaire, and most people in the population think that engineers are plumbers or car mechanics or some old man in oily rags. And of course, we need to change the conception that engineers are actually applied scientists, professionals. And that's difficult, because especially when Builder Bob has on the side of his builder's van that he's a plumbing engineer, it's very challenging to overcome that. Whereas in countries like Germany, engineer is a protected title. You cannot be called an engineer unless you have a degree. So the statistics are all out there for engineering salaries. So I found it quite interesting that the average annual engineering salary in the UK is around about the £50,000 mark. So that is certainly comparable to doctors, lawyers, architects. Of course, there's a big range, but the statistics are all out there, and I encourage you to do a little bit of digging. I mean, by all means, get in touch. I've done a presentation on this in the past. I've got the references, I've got the data to support my claim. But yeah, if you chose engineering, for example, and that's on average a £50,000 a year job, that is comparable to a lawyer or an architect or a doctor. There's £10,000 here, £10,000 there, and engineering's probably on the lower end of those professions, but it is comparable. I mean, if you consider that the national average salary is £25,000, and the average engineer is earning double what everyone else in society is earning, that's a pretty powerful message. And I think that what we do is enjoyable. We've got a very enjoyable career. So there's lots of other things that we can sell our engineering career on, other than the amount of money we earn. Is the job satisfaction, the smugness we experience when we fill a Wembley Stadium with coal, knowing that you're making a difference, you're making a real difference to society. What do lawyers do, really? They settle arguments legally. It's boring as hell. They're paid lots of money because what they do is really mundane. I mean, I'm sure some lawyers find it really interesting. Perhaps, could anyone on this call say they would honestly find poring over legal documents and correcting grammar and terminology, you would have to pay me a hell of a lot of money to do something like that. So I think there's lots of soft benefits you can say wrap around it, but ultimately STEM careers are similarly paid to other professions. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks very much, Alex. We've got another question from Julian. Do you think that the British education system pushes youth into narrow paths far too young? Looking back at my education, I was definitely a no chancer, but I was pushed into being a no chancer very early on. There must be a lot of in-betweeners who have chosen humanities too young.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with that sentiment. I mean, I chose music technology for A levels. I chose physics and stuck it out for a week and then quit. So I think I was also a no chancer. But there's nothing you could have told me at 16 to choose engineering. So I went to university later in life. But yeah, I agree with your original question that the education system could do more. I mean, I'm sure everyone on the call has had an iffy experience with a careers advisor where they tap some very suspect information into a calculator and give you a very suspect answer. I kind of always, maybe a bit cynical, but should you really be taking advice from a careers advisor? Is that really a great career? I mean, I'm sure some people love it and someone's got to do it, right? But if their career was going so well, I don't think there'd be a careers advisor. But it's a difficult thing to answer that, isn't it? Because teachers generally have never done a day's work in industry in their life. They've come out of university and they've gone straight into teaching, the vast majority of them. So it's difficult. How do you get a teacher with no life or outside world experience to give young people great career options? It's very tricky. And that's why I think we as STEM ambassadors have a real responsibility to ensure that we are the ones providing the information. When I give STEM presentations, I am savage. Actually, my most recent presentation was comparing my life as a music technology graduate from university versus an engineering graduate from university. And I gave some government statistics. There's a lot of government statistics out there about graduating engineers and graduating job prospects. And I can forward that report to you if you want, if you're interested. And I compared my life, if I had chosen music technology, to my life having chosen a career in engineering. and my chances of working in a cafe were something like 5 times higher than working in the music industry had I been a music technology graduate. Whereas you can flip those statistics and it's somewhere near 80% of your chances of becoming an engineer if you have an engineering degree. And then I compared the salary, of course. How much money are you likely to get paid as someone with a music technology degree versus engineering? And you just do side-by-side comparison of all these things. So I think it's our responsibility as STEM ambassadors to tell children the things that their teachers and their careers advisors are not going to be telling them, because a lot of teachers and careers advisors are very mindful of children's mental health, and which we should be too, of course, but they're going to be very selective in their language and what they encourage and what they discourage. They're never going to want to completely rip up some young child's dreams of becoming the next Beyonce. They're not going to do it. So instead, they'll be encouraging and supportive when that kid, their chances of being Beyonce are so slim. It's lottery odds. It's more than lottery odds. It's infinitesimally small. Whereas they might have also made a fantastic civil engineer, and their life is going to be wasted ultimately if they really choose to pursue that. That's my opinion anyway, is we as STEM ambassadors, we really need to tell children the truth, show them the numbers, show them if you choose, say, an arts degree, it could be humanities, it could be media studies, for example, any degree that we want to criticize for its poor job prospects versus a vocational career in something like STEM. So you can show them that the actual real numbers, don't filter it. Say if you are going to choose that subject, you are more likely to be working in a cafe for the next 20 years versus a rewarding career in STEM, which is much, much more likely, where there's a huge shortage of engineers, where you can pick your engineering job. You use examples. I say, I know people working for Formula One teams. I use the example of myself filling Wembley Stadium with coal, being a completely average engineer. And you start to use examples like this, and it shows kids, wow, I can do something like that. That's amazing. And it's a realistic goal. It's a likely outcome, whereas their other dream might be a fantastic outcome, but super unlikely. So that's the angle I always work.
Thanks, Alex. I think that kind of half answers Priyanka's previous question as well about the argument to kind of persuade parents that it's a good career to get into. We have another question from Priyanka. I think on behalf of her parents, have you covered the effects of Brexit on STEM careers too?
Oh, okay, that's interesting. So I did a little, may have missed it earlier on. Where is it? Okay, so if you see this graph here, so if we actually look at the total number of graduates for engineering and technology degrees only, you can see we have UK graduates in red, EU graduates in a pinky color, and non-EU in purple. Now you can see that the EU numbers have stayed pretty consistently around about the same. They haven't really been increasing much. Now, they don't take up an insignificant number, of course. Of course, they make a valuable contribution to the economy. But in 2016, they're around 10% of the total graduates, less than 10%, I believe. So to say Brexit would have no effect, I think would be naive. To say it's going to have a fairly small effect, I think would probably be more accurate. But if you consider that we need to double the number of engineers in the UK, that's that 10%. I suppose we need all the engineers we can get, of course. So yes, I think for the purposes of this discussion, only Brexit's not going to be a positive. without getting into a debate about whether Brexit is or isn't a good thing. I think interestingly, actually, COVID-19 may have more of an impact on STEM in the future, because if you consider that the non-EU and EU together are both foreign, and together they make up at least a third of UK graduates in engineering and technology degrees. Now consider, would you be comfortable going to another country in post-COVID world? I think we may see a significant drop in overseas students in general for next year. So I think that's something to consider also. Hope that answers your question.
Great, thank you. We've had a point put forward from Ben that he agrees with your point about the experience gap as teachers, and we should be supporting them as STEM ambassadors. However, many more teachers are coming into teaching as a second career and believes that that brings a varied experience with them. I think it's more of a point than a question, perhaps.
I hope Ben is right. I mean, I think that would be fantastic for young people in the UK to have some real world experience. And I'm sure there are many teachers, conversely, many of them will have never done a day's work in the real world either. So I don't have the statistics on that, so I wouldn't like to comment in too much detail. But in my personal experience, almost all the teachers I know have never worked a day in their life. Teachers I had at school, I say never worked a day in their life. That's of course not true. They've never worked in the private sector in their life. And teachers I came into contact with at school likewise. So yeah, but I agree, Ben. If we had more teachers, and if we had a high percentage of teachers who had worked in the private sector, I think that would be fantastic.
Brilliant. Well, we're right on 7 o'clock now, so well done for time. If there's any more questions yet, feel free to put them in the chat now. Otherwise, I will say, if you guys haven't joined our LinkedIn group, please kind of like the group or follow the group, because we usually post our events on there, and we'll be doing a weekly post, as I said earlier, about on kind of sharing what our collaborators are doing. And we also, if you sign up through the Eventbrite, also if you tick the option to follow the CIBSE South West on Eventbrite, you'll automatically get updated with any events that we put online. So the next event that we're hosting, and this is a joint collaborative event with LETI, UKGBC, REBA and the Southwest Energy Hub. It's tomorrow afternoon from 3 till 4. So it's a collaborative action on climate change webinar in specifics to the Southwest. So what does net zero mean for the Southwest? So if you're interested in that, and it's looking at the kind of the climate change action documents that LETI and UKGBC and REBA have all produced in order to help us tackle climate change and achieve net zero carbon. So we've got no more questions there. So once again, I want to say thank you very much, Alex. That was a really insightful presentation. And yeah, hopefully we can do another one again soon, maybe in person next time when we've gotten out of lockdown. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carla, and thank you very much to everyone on the call. It's been an absolute pleasure.